Good morning, everyone. My name's Tom Gonzalez. I'm Manitoba Agriculture's vegetable crop specialist, and I'd like to welcome you to this year's 2021 Hort School Summer Webinar Series. The group that is providing the content for the series includes staff from Manitoba Agriculture and Resource Development, Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada, and Assiniboine Community College. Basically, today's webinar is in the form of a Q&A. If you have questions, either before that you've brought or questions that come up because of the content you hear, if you can type them into the question and answer feature on your screen, we'll do our best to get those answered as quickly as we can today. For today, we're going to go over three sort of main areas to discuss. We're open to discuss other things based on questions, but we're going to have an update on a few insects, including leafhoppers and some others. We're going to have a question that was sent in to me via email regarding use of glyphosate. And then we're going to talk about discussion of nutrient timing in a greenhouse situation for producing transplants. But before we get started, Lori, could you launch the first two questions for me, please?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's our first poll. It says, how do you see yourself with the horticultural industry? Producer of horticultural crops, work in agri-supply, agribusiness, government or university personnel, or other. If you can select what fits you best and submit, that would be great. Let's see, votes are coming in. Oh, right on. Everyone voted very fast. We've got them knowing we're going to do this now. I can actually launch that now. All right, so here's your results. 10% producer of horticultural crops, 20% work in agri-supply, agribusiness, 60% government or university personnel, and 10% other.
Okay, that's interesting.
All right, so you wanted the second one now, is that right?
Please.
Okay. If you are a horticultural producer, what size is your farm? So if you could select one, please. 0 to 4.9 acres, 5 to 14.9 acres, 15 to 49.9 acres, or 50 plus acres. All right, so people are voting. That's great. Give it a couple more seconds here. Okay. So here's your results. 0 to 4.9 acres is 60%, and 15 to 49.9 acres is 40%. The other two are 0.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so let's move into our sort of first part of our discussion this morning, and that'll be regarding insects. And we have John Gavlosky with us. John, do you want to come around? And like I said before John starts, if you got any questions either regarding what John's talking about or just any questions that come up, feel free to type them in the chat. So, John, you were going to discuss a few insect updates, I believe.
Yeah, just to bring people up to speed on a few insects that we're commonly seeing out in the fields. And I wait for my slide to advance here. I'm going to focus mainly on grasshoppers, leafhoppers, and I'll give you a bit of an update on Diamondback Moth as well. So We're just having technical issues at our end here as we try to.
Just click the screen. There we go. It should work now.
Next. There we go. Awesome. So, okay. So we'll start with leaf hoppers. Now, what we do is we sweep roadside ditches and some crops in June. Well, we start actually in May, sweeping mainly roadside ditches. That's often where you find Aster leaf hoppers when they first arrive. And we did start finding them in June. I'll say moderate levels. I have sent some away for testing for the Aster yellows pathogen. There's a lab at AAFC in Saskatoon that will do that. Of the 6 samples I sent away, 5 were totally negative, and we had 50 to 60 leaf hoppers per sample. So 5 of them were negative. Now, they made an error in their 6 samples, so they couldn't give me the percent infectivity, but they told me the 6th one did have Aster yellows detected in it. So I'm still waiting. I sent them some further samples. I'm still waiting for results. So I'm trying to get a firm number of what the percent infectivity is. But right now, like I said, considering that some of these samples came back totally negative, that's a good thing. It there possibly is some Aster leaf hoppers, Aster yellows in the leaf hoppers, but the percent I'm gonna guess is likely low if a lot of the samples were testing at 0. Now that being said, if you're growing carrots, celery, or any of the vegetable crops that seem to be quite sensitive to Aster leaf hopper, it is good to be out there checking. Take a sweep net, especially with carrots. It's easy to sweep them with a sweep net. Do some sweeps and you can see what your population is like. One word of warning, there's a lot of leaf hoppers in Manitoba. There's actually hundreds of species, and there's just 2 that really are considered pests. There's the Aster and the potato. Aster leaf hopper, you can see it in my slide here. They're kind of yellowish, grayish tinge to it. What defines it though is the spots on it. And here's a better picture. You can see that there's between the eyes, there's 2 dots, and then below that, there's 4 dashes. And that's the Aster leaf hopper is sometimes called 6-spotted leaf hopper. And that's what the 6 spots refers to, is those 2 dots and 4 dashes on the face between the eyes. But you need a good magnifier or a microscope to see that. If you just catch them in your net and they're hopping away, you probably won't really have a chance to see that. So sometimes it might be worthwhile to, if you have, what I do is I have a little aspirator that I collect a few, I freeze them, kill them, then I can identify them. But if you can't do that, magnifier, you might be able to see those dots. And they are tiny. So that's the size of them. I guess the penny's obsolete. I probably should put them on a dime or something. But anyway, they're small things. Diamondback moth, I guess probably good news on this front. We put up pheromone baited traps in early May and we ran them till the end of June. Most traps, the numbers were fairly low. We did have a few traps in the eastern region that I'll say got to moderate numbers, up around 100 in 6 weeks. And there was one trap up in the pod that also got up into that 100 range. Now that's not startling. It means that yes, some have blown in, and it means scout your crops for the larva. And reports I've had from both the canola growers and one report from a vegetable grower, or agronomist rather, was that yes, they are present, but they were not, I haven't had any reports of high levels yet of the larva.
Okay.
So now a couple of reasons for that. The populations that blew in were small enough that they just haven't ballooned to something more substantial. Also, some years when the diamondback moth blows in from the south, there's a parasitic wasp called diadigma that also gets blown in with it. And if they're in high levels, sometimes they can do a good job containing that population. So that's another possibility there. And here's the traps that we put up. We monitor about 90 of these traps across the province every year. And the data from these traps is on our website. We post the highest counts in every region on the insect page of our Manitoba Ag and Food Ag Food and Rural Initiative's website. And grasshoppers, that's probably the biggest insect concern out there right now, because some areas there is a fair abundance of grasshoppers. And the one caution I have regarding grasshoppers is there's lots of species. We've got something like 85 species of grasshoppers in Manitoba. There's 4 that we consider potential pests. So if you're scouting a field edge or a ditch area for grasshoppers, do note sometimes katydids are super abundant. They won't move into your crop and do crop feeding. So they're a non-pest species. This one here, two-striped grasshopper, pest species. If you're having lots of those, that's potentially an issue. Another one that we're seeing a fair amount of this year, though, is the Clearwing Grasshopper. They call it Clearwing, but it's a bad name because actually if you look on the forewings here, they do have these black dots. The hind wing is the one that's clear, the forewing isn't, but so it's not really appropriately named. But if they've got these 2 white stripes going down the back, plus they've got these dots here, it's clear-winged. And this one here is a grass specialist. They prefer to feed on grasses. If you're seeing a lot of them, odds are they will prefer roadside grasses, pasture grasses, cereal crops, forage grasses. They are not likely to move into your vegetable crops and feed on them. Whereas, I'll go back a slide, two-striped grasshopper, it also has the 2 stripes, but there's no spots on the wings. That one's a generalist. It will feed on many plants, including a lot of things in your vegetable fields or gardens. So getting to know the species is good. And the other insect that we're seeing a lot of right now is blister beetles. And these will feed on particularly things in the legume family, so beans, possibly peas a little bit. Now they will feed on things other than legumes. I've got a picture of one here feeding on a canola flower. Alfalfa definitely is top of their list. They usually don't do significant economic damage through their feeding. Our bigger concern is usually people who are cutting crops for hay. You don't want blister beetles in there, so I've posted information this week on our pest update on how to avoid that. There is a good side to blister beetles. These species at the top, the black one and the gray one, their juveniles feed specifically on grasshopper eggs, and that's why we're seeing a lot of blister beetles this year. When the grasshopper populations build, they have lots of food, or their larvae have lots of food. So it builds the blister beetle population. So that's why we're seeing a lot of them. Yeah, keep an eye on things, but normally they're not doing economic damage. Although if you're growing things for that really can't tolerate a lot of foliation, you may need to keep an eye on this. You might also note that there's a white spot on the back of this gray one here. That's actually the egg of a fly. This egg will hatch, and a larva will burrow into this blister beetle and eat it from the inside out and kill it. So sometimes they're heavily parasitized as well. So that's what I have as an update. I wanted to keep it brief. Hopefully I didn't go over time. No. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Okay, I'm just trying to bring up the chat. Lori, can you see the chat right now? I haven't been able to get it open here.
Yeah, no, there's no questions currently in the chat or the questions tab. So if you miss anything, I'll jump in.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so I think one of the things that when I've been out and about talking with the growers, you know, is the grasshopper is one thing that comes up in conversation, you know, and the tie-in with the elevated blister beetles rising when the grasshopper population goes up, I think helps explain to guys why they're rising.
Exactly.
You know? So anyway, thanks, John. Excuse me. Our next part of the discussion is based on a question that was emailed to me last week. The question, just have to dig it out here. Part 2. Okay, here is the question. I sprayed a portion of my field with glyphosate after I seeded, but prior to emergence, and part of the field was not sprayed since I ran out of chemical. The portion of the field sprayed emerged, but appears to be less healthy than that area not sprayed. The entire field has been given the same treatments other than this glyphosate spray. My question is, can glyphosate affect emergence and vigor if applied before the seed emerges? And I'm just wanted to bring in Kim Brown to see, she's the weed specialist with Manitoba Agriculture, and see what thoughts Kim might have to that question. Kim?
Yeah, hi Tom, thanks for having me on this morning. Pre-seed glyphosate does not have any activity in the soil, none whatsoever. In fact, when it hits the soil, it's immediately binds and it's immediately inactivated. So there isn't anything at all in glyphosate that hangs around in the soil that can cause any problems with crops coming up. Now, if it was straight glyphosate, that's like I said, there's nothing at all in glyphosate. Sometimes people, quite often actually, and we actually do encourage that you throw another product in the tank to tank mix, to have another mode of action in there to get away, to reduce resistance from starting. So if there was another product in the tank, like a 2,4-D, or there's numerous products that can be tank mixed with glyphosate. Some of those definitely do have residues that will affect emergence of certain crops, but on its own, glyphosate does not have any activity in soil. It binds immediately, and it just doesn't work. It has no activity. In fact, if you were spraying in water that has suspended dirt in it, like suspended particles, like if you're using water from a dugout and it's quite dirty, if the water gets churned up when you're filling the spray tank, that actually will make, that is enough to make glyphosate not work, because it binds to the dirt particles that are actually in the spray water. So there just isn't anything about glyphosate that could do that if it was glyphosate on its own. So maybe if that person is on the call, they could, put something in the chat and just make sure there wasn't anything else in the spray tank. But definitely there are other products that would have an effect on emerging plants, but not glyphosate.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this question falls to the concept of, in the question, he's saying sprayed prior to emergence, but how close is it to emergence? Like, is there a crack in the, like it was vine crops that were seeded in there, and it's fairly robust seed, and it's not like a carrot or a canola plant when it's coming out that's fairly wimpy. Like, this is a large diameter seedling when it's coming out of the ground, relatively speaking. And there is the potential for spray to follow the growth crack, not a growth crack, a ground crack, and hit a growing tip, even if that growing tip is not technically out of the ground yet, kind of thing. Without the spray, without hitting the soil, could still potentially hit the emerging seed. Just, it depends on a lot of factors, but I mean, it is possible. We've seen some issues of that over the years, so that's another factor to consider.
Yeah,
go ahead.
for sure, Tom. That's something that we've seen, that even in a cereal crop that is a very tiny seedling coming out. It's just one little thin pokey leaf. Just the minute there's anything poking above the soil and you spray with glyphosate, if glyphosate hits a plant, it's going to get into that plant and get into the root system. It might not be enough to outright kill that plant because there's not a lot of plant there to take up the herbicide, but it is enough to hurt it. And we have seen that even in cereal crops, which are a very small seedling when they're first coming out of the ground, and If there's any part of the plant poking out of the ground at all, they can take up some spray. So sometimes you can get these sublethal doses because you were at ground crack or slightly beyond. You have to be very careful with glyphosate, like with any pre-emerge spray. A pre-plant is very safe because nothing's in the ground yet. And if you're doing a pre-emergent spray, you have to be very careful that nothing has emerged, and you have to watch the whole field because it will be a little bit uneven. Things will come up, you know, one day earlier than other areas, kind of thing. So you really have to watch that. But that's a good point, Tom. There could have been something just starting to come through the ground that picked up some chemical.
And in the way the question was worded, let me find it here. The portion of the field sprayed emerged, but appears to be less healthy than the area not sprayed. And that could be, like, I'd have to almost see the field, it's the situation itself, but let's say it's a very obvious straight line down a field on the end of a spray where the spray boom was, you know, then I would say that the odds were that it could be could have been at ground crack and not still under the soil, kind of thing, because certainly we've even quite common in pumpkins, or it's human nature, I think, for producers to want to push that envelope. You know, they'll go out and dig around a little bit and say, oh, I think it's, you know, going to be at least 3 days till everything is up, so I'll spray tomorrow. Well, chances are there's some parts of that field that could be maybe on a southern slope, getting a little more sun or something, and emerge a little quicker, kind of thing. So, you know, that will happen. Kim, when you were mentioning tank mixes to have a different mode of action, did you have any comments regarding what tank mixes you might think are appropriate?
Yeah, like anything, you have to be really careful because there's a lot of products have some residual. In fact, for a lot of products, that's why we put them in the ground because that's why we do a pre-emerge, because we want that product to be there and to have that residual as the weed seeds emerge. So basically, anything that you would put ahead of a canola crop, which is pretty limited, there's just a few products ahead of a canola crop, those have absolutely no residual, and they would be quite safe. Now, they wouldn't be registered ahead of a hort crop, but that would be something that you could use, and that's something pretty simple, like a bromoxynol, which is Partner. There's AIM, which is just a burn off type thing. Those have no soil residual. So there's a few products ahead of canola, but once you get into any of the other products, like even a 2,4-D or possibly an MCPA, most people don't do an MCPA in the spring like that, but even a 2,4-D has some soil residual, and it would affect some plants. It can affect plant emergence. Again, it does break down quickly, but again, depending when it was put in, it depends on a lot of factors, which is microbial breakdown is driven by moisture and temperature of the soil. So even something as simple as a 2,4-D has, you know, can have some residual in the soil for a few weeks, and that definitely could affect some plants, some broadleaf plants as they emerge. And some of our crops, I think especially are like you said, our vine crops are very, very sensitive to pesticide residues like that. And then any of the products, or not any, but a lot of the products you put ahead of cereals, and that would have some type of residual in them. So I would be really careful with that. So you'd have to be very careful putting residual products on ahead of a hort crop.
Yeah, and I think that's the message here, is that when it comes to vegetable crops, or, you know, hort crops in general, the use of tank mixes that may work in more field crop situations are not I would go as, I don't know if it's going too far, but are not really recommended in that sense, you know. Putting glyphosate on is one thing, but when you're putting something with a bit of residual in there, there's always that that risk, I guess. Any questions showing up, Lori?
Yeah, actually, I have a couple here.
Okay.
Does organic growing also include small amounts of pesticide if needed only?
Well, I will take a stab at that one. Basically, organic certification requires the use of products that are certified organic. So in the sense of, say, pesticides, I could use the example of some insecticides. There's spinocides used for insect control, and one formulation, name's escaping me, is not organic, and the organic formulation is called Entrust. It has the same active ingredient, but the formulation, the binders, the carriers, part of what makes the product, not the active ingredient, but part of what makes it up, is not deemed to be organic. So it's not the active ingredient, in this case, the spinosad, that's making the one type whose name's escaping me right now. Success. There you go. So the short answer is there are some pesticides that are organically certified, but don't just assume if one pesticide with an active ingredient is organically certified, another pesticide with the same active ingredient is, because it might not be. It has to do with the whole formulation. So I hope that answers the question. And you said there was another one, Lori?
Yeah, it was just a note here regarding books. This person is looking for books. Person can buy for Manitoba prairies for fruit, vegetable growing, landscape setup, herbs and vegetables, companions, and he's found a lot of books on Amazon, but would like to be more Manitoba specific. So
Right.
even if you want to share some of those titles with me, I can also email Lee these titles as well.
Well, and
Hi.
we could even
This
push
is Sarah. I
out.
just wanted to quickly add something here, if you don't mind.
You go ahead, Sarah.
I just wanted to bring your attention to the fact that there are actually some biopesticide products that are organic approved as well. Those would be available as well. And then the question is also, do you want to be a certified organic grower, or do you just are looking for some safer grade product, or like food grade products that you would like to use, right? If you're a market gardener. So in those cases, these biopesticides would be available. And if you want more information through my new use program, we have success at registering quite a few of those. So if you want more information, I would be able to provide some of that as well. Feel free to reach out.
Right on. Thank you. Now, just getting back to the question of books and stuff. If like I just can't see the chat, but if someone could copy the question down and email it to me, then basically we could find some answers to where and how they could get some and push that out to everybody, not just the individual who asked the question, kind of.
That's great. We can do that. I will definitely send that out to you, Tom, as well as everyone else on the call today as well.
Okay. So you just have to bear with me for a second because I need to bring up a file that's been given to me. So where are we going, Vikram?
2021.
2021. Don't see anything here. Just bear with us for a second.
Let's go.
Here. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so
Can you bring this one down?
this one. Okay. So let's see. So is everyone seeing a single slide on their screen with 4 pictures?
Looks great.
Great. Okay. Thanks for bearing with the technology there. Basically, one of the things that we're going to be discussing here, I have Vikram Bisht with me. He's the horticulture pathologist with Manitoba Agriculture, and Vikram and I were on a farm call, what, a month and a half ago? I can't remember.
About a month ago.
Quite a while ago, and went to see some tomato and pepper transplants where the producer thought there was some disease in there, and basically Vikram has some pictures here, and I'll let him and I'll discuss it a bit. Here we go.
It's Marla again. I don't really know much about what Tom was planning on speaking to next. I know it did have to do with some questions around nutrient management, fertilizer management, I believe in a greenhouse system. But I believe because Vikram was planning on covering this and they have the background information, I believe we'll have to probably move this one to next week if they're not able to come back online. Otherwise, I would on it.
Yeah, and
I don't
think,
know enough about it to make any comments.
Yeah, I think we're kind of leading towards that today.
Okay.
We only have about 15 minutes or so left in today's broadcast. So I will, I think we will wrap up today's broadcast and send some emails to everyone. If there were some questions that weren't answered, we can get that information back to you. Other than that, we will see everyone in 2 weeks, July 23rd, for the next edition of Horticultural School 2021. Thank you, everyone, and have a super great day.